But let's start with the book. We've been talking about it. I want to kind of get that in here because it's so important. And, it's the Earth experiment, right? It's how the DNA, the grid. I mean, watching you on a YouTube, like draw the 12th dimensional grid, and you're like into it and you're showing how it goes in. I'm like, that was the movie they showed you. Because it was like, how does she know? Like, it's not like you went to school and learned about this grid, like, but you're over there like a teacher, like drawing it with the pen. Like she really knows, like that galactic teacher really knows how to teach you.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, I didn't know any of the information, and I didn't watch people. I didn't watch I didn't go and research. A lot of people do a lot of research when they write a book. I was specifically told, do not check this information. Do not go and listen to other people. It was very specific to just keep the information as pure as possible. But they showed it. It would be like if you were shown a movie scene, okay, like some sort of movie scene, I don't know, from The Matrix, right? Like a 5-minute reel. And then they were like, okay, now go and explain it. You'd be able to. You'd be like, oh my God, they showed me this and this and this. So that's kind of how, but of course it's not physical. So then it's like, well, how did you see it? Like, I don't know. I don't know how I saw what they showed me. It's a really strange way that the information came in, because it was simultaneously sort of given to me like a movie scene, and then a knowingness that dropped in of like, this is what it means. But the crazy thing about like the 12th dimensional grid or like DNA or the things that came through is I actually had to sit and like, there were many times where I had, especially with the 5th dimensional grid, that really confused me big time. I just didn't understand it. I still sort of don't. Like, why do we have it? Why would you open it? Why would you close it? Like, there's still things that confused me. So I would have to sit and like draw. I would draw a lot. Like I had to make sense of it. It didn't make sense right away. So it was like, wait, what does this mean? Like, how does this work? And why would they say this? And how can I make sense of what they just told me? So I would really have to break it down. And it would hurt my brain. It would just be like, I can't get it. You know how like when you're trying to figure out a problem, like a math problem or something, you're like, oh my God, or a science problem. You're like, I can't get it. That's what it was like a lot of the time when I wrote the book. It was like the beginning, the first like 6 chapters. It was like, because I didn't know the information, it was complex. I was like, but as soon as it clicked, I was like, oh my God, I got it. This makes so much sense. It just started to make sense.
Right. But when you talk about, I was trying to think of how to give this summary, the Cliff Notes version, but what I loved and how it started was, we all decided to come here. This is the time that we all decided, like we made this choice. And started in 1920s when there was a group of, we go there, I think, is that a good place to start?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, this was like Earth is a consciousness, just like you're a consciousness and I'm a consciousness, and we're inside a physical body, right? So Earth herself is a consciousness, and she's inside the physical form, which we call the planet. And essentially, she is having an experience. She's having an experiment. And it's hard for us to grasp that it could be as simple as, really, truly just wanting to shift frequencies inside a physical form. But it truly is that simple, but it's complex in physical form. And so in the 1920s, that was when we had what's called the clarion call. And the clarion call, you can imagine a call as like a tone or a vibrational pulse that goes out to let's just call it the universe, right? It's in the 12th dimensional grid, but not to get too complex for people. We'll just call it the universe, okay? So this call goes out that Earth needs assistance, that around this time, there was a lot of chaos, and there was destruction. There was building of like these atomic bombs. Things were going to be destroying the earth, literally, physically. And so they being sort of the energies that were watching over this whole experiment, needed assistance from consciousnesses, souls, spirits, to enter into physical forms. That's the only way that you can make the biggest impact, and to assist the planet and the human collective into higher vibrations, higher frequencies. The easiest way to describe it, right? The first question people are going to say, well, why? Again, it's quite simply a very boring answer. Earth literally wanted to experience herself moving from one dimensional field or frequency to another. It's literally that simple. It's just that when you put it into a really dense field of consciousness, the third dimension, where there's physicality, duality, and polarity, it can get really messy. So Earth was starting to sort of get pulled down into lower frequencies by humans on the planet. So it was like, hey, we need soldiers. We need soldiers to come down. We need help on the actual battlefield. And so that clarion call was really, really important. Dolores Cannon talks about the 3 waves of volunteers. The 3 waves of volunteers came during the clarion call. And so it's interesting because during the clarion call, let's just call it around the 1920s, you may not have come in until 60s, 1970s, right? And I didn't come in until 1975, but we heard the clarion call in the 20s, and then we chose when we were going to come in.
Okay.
Right? So the 3 waves of volunteers are just that she talks about. And I talk about it in my book a little bit, slightly different, but it's very similar to what she has said. We chose as consciousnesses, souls, or spirits when we were going to enter into the physical body. I'm going to go in 1942. I'm going to go in 1927. I'm going to go in 1995. Your daughters probably answered the call, if they're connected to you. So answering the call doesn't necessarily mean that you're somebody like myself. Okay. It means that you consciously chose to incarnate in a physical form in order to assist a global shift in consciousness. And however you decide to do that is how you uniquely decide to do that. There can be the mailman, the trash guy that comes and grabs our trash every week. He could be making an impact just based on who he is as a spirit in a body. Right. So we have this idea that we have to be doing specific work. And unfortunately, that's one of the biggest disservices that we believe, because it's simply being on the planet at this time. It's simply clearing out your own trauma, opening your heart, being more compassionate, having more empathy, being the observer, like being able to hear all these other perspectives and somehow find a unified field in all of it. Like, these are the simple ways that we're shifting the frequency on the planet. But we think, like, if you've been kind of awake for a little while, you're like, well, I've got to be doing something specific, and I got to make sure that I'm making a difference. And it's like, dude, you just being in the physical body is miraculous enough. Like, you are doing so much work, but we don't see it. Right. So we have a really hard time believing that we are making an impact. And I think the more that you sort of wake up into what this is and what we're doing here, the more you want to make an impact. And plus, many of us have probably had lifetimes previous to coming in during the clarion call where we made impact.
You mean in the clarion call, we've come before and left and came back?
Yeah, I think a lot of us. So it's really interesting about reincarnation, in coming in to the human experience multiple times, is you could go thousands of years and not come back in. You could have been here 10 million years ago during the Lemurian and Atlantis times and never come back until the clarion call. You were like, peace out. I am not doing that third dimension. Like, heck no. Right. So there is always, from my experience and my understanding, a choice in each incarnation and each reincarnation. And you get to decide if and when you want to come back down. So I think there were a lot of inner consciousnesses, soul spirits that answered the clarion call because we knew that this was the time. We knew that this was finally going to be the time on the planet where we actually started to see the physical evolution, which means that we start to physically see humanity change, shift.
Will you explain that so people understand what that looks like? Because people are like, oh, are we going to another Earth? Are we